The blue glow of the computer screen illuminated Sarah's face as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Don't stop," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Please don't stop telling me about your daughter. I never knew how much I needed to hear this tonight." If you're wondering how a desperate late-night tech support call turned into one of the most profound conversations of two people's lives, stay with me. This story might just change how you see the unexpected connections that can form in our most vulnerable moments. If this resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that explore the depth of human connection. It had been the day from hell for Mark Jenkins. His alarm hadn't gone off, his 7-year-old daughter Emma had spilled orange juice all over her school uniform, and he'd been late for an important client meeting. Being a single dad working in IT support while trying to build his own computer repair business on the side wasn't exactly how he'd planned his life to unfold. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming back?" Emma had asked that morning, her innocent question piercing his heart like it always did. 3 years had passed since Diane had walked out, deciding that family life wasn't for her after all. 3 years of Mark explaining to Emma that sometimes people need to find their own path, even when he didn't understand it himself. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart? Mommy lives far away now, but she loves you very much," he'd said, the words feeling hollow as they always did. Emma had nodded, her eyes downcast, before asking if they could have pizza for dinner. Children were resilient that way, bouncing back from heartbreak with thoughts of pepperoni and cheese. By the time Mark had tucked Emma into bed at his mother's house, grateful as always for her willingness to help with late-night childcare emergencies, he was exhausted. He'd just settled onto his couch with a beer when his phone rang. The caller ID showed, "Sarah Winters, boss." Mark groaned. Sarah was the marketing director at Tech Solutions where he worked during the day. She was brilliant, driven, and notoriously demanding. At 35, she was only a few years older than Mark, but her career trajectory had skyrocketed while his had stalled after becoming a single parent. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep the weariness from his voice. "Mark, thank God you picked up," Sarah said, her voice tight with stress. "My laptop crashed, and I have a presentation for the board tomorrow morning. Everything's on it, all my files, the entire proposal. I've tried everything, but it won't even turn on. I know it's late, but I'm desperate." Mark closed his eyes, thinking of his comfortable couch and the beer that would now grow warm. "Have you tried?" "Yes, I've tried turning it off and on again," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "I'm sorry. I need help, Mark. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Something in her voice, a vulnerability he'd never heard before, made him sit up straighter. "Text me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sarah lived in one of those sleek downtown apartment buildings with a doorman and a view. It was a far cry from Mark's modest 2-bedroom rental in the suburbs. When she opened the door, he barely recognized her. Gone was the impeccably dressed executive with the perfect hair and confident smile. Instead, she wore sweatpants and an oversized university hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face free of makeup and etched with worry. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I know it's late." The apartment was minimalist and elegant, but what struck Mark most was how impersonal it felt. No family photos, no mementos, just carefully selected artwork and furniture that looked like it came straight from a design magazine. "Nice place," he said, setting down his toolkit. Sarah shrugged. "It's just a place to sleep between workdays." She led him to a glass desk where her laptop sat, dark and unresponsive. "It just died while I was working. No warning, nothing." Mark got to work, first trying the obvious solutions, then opening up the laptop to check for hardware issues. As he worked, Sarah paced behind him, her anxiety palpable. "This presentation is everything," she said. "I've been working toward this for months. If I don't nail it tomorrow, I can kiss that VP position goodbye." Mark nodded, focused on the task at hand. When's the last time you backed up your files? The silence that followed told him everything he needed to know. I've been meaning to set up cloud backups, she finally admitted. I just never got around to it. An hour into the repair, Mark had identified the problem, a failed hard drive, but recovering the data would be challenging. As he worked, the silence between them grew uncomfortable. Would you like some coffee? Sarah finally asked. Or something stronger? I feel bad keeping you up this late. Coffee would be great, Mark said, surprised by the offer. In the office, Sarah wasn't known for her consideration of others' needs. She returned with 2 mugs and set one beside him. How's your daughter? Emma, right? Mark looked up, startled that she remembered his daughter's name. She's good. Growing too fast. How old is she now? 7. Going on 17, sometimes. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. That must be nice, having someone waiting for you at home. There was something in her tone, a loneliness that resonated with Mark's own. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Emma had a nightmare. Asking for you. She's okay now, but wanted you to know. Mark's face must have betrayed his concern because Sarah immediately asked, Is everything all right? Emma had a nightmare. She's with my mom tonight since I didn't know how long this would take. Sarah's expression shifted. You should go. We can try again tomorrow. No, it's okay. My mom says she's settled now. Mark hesitated, then added, Emma's been having nightmares since her mom left. They come and go. Her mother left? Sarah asked quietly. Mark nodded, surprised at himself for sharing something so personal with his boss. 3 years ago. Decided family life wasn't for her after all. Sarah was silent for a moment. That must be incredibly difficult for both of you. We manage, Mark said, turning back to the laptop. Some days are harder than others. As he continued working, something shifted in the atmosphere between them. Sarah sat down on the couch nearby, cradling her coffee mug. My presentation tomorrow, she said suddenly. It's for a family-friendly marketing campaign. I've been researching what parents look for, what matters to them. But I don't really know, not firsthand. Mark glanced up. You don't have kids? She shook her head. Never found the time. Or the right person, I guess. She took a sip of her coffee. My sister has 3. She's always telling me I'm missing out, but then in the same breath complaining about how exhausted she is. Mark laughed. Both things can be true. It's exhausting and it's the best thing in my life. Tell me about her, Sarah said. Emma. What's she like? And so, as Mark worked to recover her precious files, he found himself talking about Emma. About her obsession with space and how she wanted to be an astronaut. About how she collected rocks and insisted each one had a personality. About how she'd learned to make her own lunches because she knew mornings were hard for him. She sounds remarkable, Sarah said, her voice soft. She is, Mark agreed. She's the reason I get up every morning. Even on the hardest days. As the night wore on, their conversation deepened. Sarah spoke about her own childhood, growing up with parents who valued achievement above all else. About the pressure she'd always felt to succeed, to prove herself. About how empty her apartment felt when she came home each night. Sometimes I wonder what I'm working so hard for, she admitted. Another promotion? A bigger apartment? For what? By the time Mark had recovered most of her files, around midnight, they'd shared more with each other than either had expected. As he showed her the recovered presentation, relief washed over her face. You're a lifesaver, she said. Truly. Just doing my job, he replied, beginning to pack up his tools. No, Sarah said, touching his arm lightly. It's more than that. You came here at 9 o'clock at night to help me. You've been kind when I've been nothing but demanding at work. Mark shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. She hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said, about Emma's interest in space. The company has tickets to the new exhibit at the Science Center. They were meant for clients, but maybe you could take her this weekend? Mark looked up, surprised by the offer. She'd love that. And maybe. Sarah paused, suddenly looking uncertain. Maybe I could join you. I'd like to meet her. If that's not weird. The request caught Mark off guard. I think she'd like that, he said finally. She's always asking about where I work, who I work with. Sarah smiled, and in that moment, she looked younger, less burdened. I should let you get home. It's late. As Mark gathered his things, Sarah walked him to the door. Thank you again, for everything. Not just the computer. What do you mean? For talking with me. For sharing about Emma. Her eyes glistened with unexpected emotion. I was sitting here alone, panicking about this presentation, feeling like my whole life would fall apart if I didn't get this promotion. And then you came and talked about what really matters, and I just... She took a deep breath. Don't stop, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please don't stop telling me about your daughter. I never knew how much I needed to hear this tonight. Mark stood there, toolkit in hand, suddenly seeing his boss, seeing Sarah, in an entirely new light. Not as the demanding executive, but as a person carrying her own burdens, fighting her own battles. Maybe we can continue the conversation at the Science Center, he said gently. Emma will do most of the talking anyway. She has that effect on people. Sarah laughed, wiping away an unexpected tear. I'd like that. As Mark drove home that night, he thought about how strange life could be. How you could work alongside someone for years and never really see them. How a broken computer could lead to a broken wall between two people who needed connection more than they realized. The next morning, Mark arrived at work to find a coffee on his desk and a note. The presentation went perfectly. Board loved it. Science Center this Saturday? Sarah. 6 months later, Sarah became a regular fixture at their weekend outings. Emma adored her, especially after Sarah arranged for them to video chat with a real NASA engineer for Emma's 8th birthday. Mark found himself looking forward to their time together, to the easy conversation, to the way Sarah listened intently to Emma's endless stories. One evening, as they walked Emma home from the park, the little girl skipping ahead of them, Sarah turned to Mark. You know, I got that VP position I was so desperate for. I know, Mark said. Congratulations, again. It doesn't feel as important as I thought it would, she admitted. Not compared to this. She gestured toward Emma, who was examining a particularly interesting leaf she'd found. This? Being here. With you too. Being part of something that matters. Mark took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the past months. You know, when you called me that night to fix your computer, I never imagined we'd end up here. Sarah squeezed his hand. Sometimes the things that break lead us to exactly where we need to be. As Emma ran back to show them her leaf discovery, her face alight with excitement, Mark knew that Sarah was right. Sometimes life's interruptions, a late-night call, a broken computer, a whispered "don't stop," weren't interruptions at all, but the beginning of something unexpected and beautiful. That night, as Mark tucked Emma into bed, she asked, "Is Sarah going to be around for a long time, Daddy?" Mark smiled, thinking of the woman who had gone from demanding boss to something much more meaningful in their lives. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. And as he closed Emma's door, he thought about how life rarely follows the path we expect. How sometimes, the most important connections form when we're at our most vulnerable. How a simple act of kindness, showing up to help someone in need, can open doors we never knew existed. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Because in a world where we're all struggling with our own broken parts, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is show up for each other, listen, and whisper those simple words that can change everything. Don't stop. In the year that followed, Mark's small side business began to flourish. With Sarah's marketing expertise and encouragement, he transformed his occasional repair jobs into a legitimate company specializing in data recovery and emergency tech support for small businesses. He named it Don't Stop Tech Solutions, a private joke between them that made Sarah smile every time she saw the logo. Emma thrived too. Her nightmares became less frequent, and her interest in space evolved into a broader passion for science. Sarah introduced her to coding through child-friendly programs, and soon Emma was creating simple games and animations, her face glowing with pride as she showed them off. "You're good with her," Mark said one evening as they watched Emma working intently at the computer. "Natural, even." Sarah looked surprised. "I never thought I would be. I always assumed I'd be terrible with children, like my mother was." "Sometimes we become exactly what we needed when we were young," Mark observed. "You listen to her. You take her seriously. That matters." On the anniversary of their late-night computer repair session, Mark invited Sarah to dinner at his place after Emma had gone to bed. He'd cooked her favorite meal and set the table with candles, a far cry from their usual casual dinners with Emma. "What's the occasion?" Sarah asked, taking in the romantic setting with a raised eyebrow. "1 year since you called me in a panic about your presentation," Mark said, pouring her a glass of wine. 1 year since everything changed." Sarah smiled, taking the glass. "Best technical emergency I've ever had." After dinner, they sat on the couch, the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words. "I've been thinking," Sarah said finally. "About us. About Emma." Mark felt his heart rate quicken. "What about us? My lease is up next month. And that apartment, it never felt like home." "Not really." She took a deep breath. "I spend most of my time here anyway. Emma has practically given me my own drawer for my things." Mark laughed. "She organized it by color. She was very proud of herself." "I saw," Sarah said, smiling. "What would you think about me not renewing my lease? About me being here, officially?" Mark took her hand. "Are you asking to move in with us?" "I am," she said, suddenly looking uncertain. "Is that crazy? Too fast? I know it's only been a year, but—" Mark leaned forward and kissed her, silencing her doubts. "It's not too fast. Not when it feels this right." The following weekend, they told Emma over breakfast. Mark had been nervous about her reaction, but he needn't have worried. "Finally!" Emma exclaimed, throwing her hands up dramatically. "I've been waiting forever." Sarah laughed. "Forever? Really?" "Yes. Now you can help me with my science project every day, not just sometimes. And we can have pancakes in the morning because Daddy always burns them." "Hey!" Mark protested, but he was laughing too. As they helped Sarah move her things into their home over the next few weeks, Mark was struck by how seamlessly she fit into their lives. Her carefully selected artwork found places among Emma's drawings. Her books mingled with his on the shelves. Her coffee mug, the same one she'd used that night when he'd fixed her computer, took its place beside theirs in the cabinet. One night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah found Mark standing in the living room, looking at a newly hung family photo, the three of them at the science center, Emma between them, all smiles. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "About how different things were 2 years ago. How alone I felt. How focused you were on that next promotion." He turned to face her. How neither of us could have imagined this. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. I was so caught up in proving myself, in building this perfect career. I thought that was what would make me happy. And now? She glanced toward Emma's bedroom door, then back at Mark. Now I know that happiness isn't about what you achieve. It's about who you share it with. 6 months after Sarah moved in, on a crisp autumn evening, Mark proposed. It wasn't an elaborate affair, just the three of them at the planetarium where they'd had their first outing together. As the stars swirled overhead in the domed ceiling, Emma handed Sarah a small box with the ring inside. Will you be part of our family forever? Emma asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. Sarah looked from Emma to Mark, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes to forever. Their wedding was small and perfect. Emma served as both flower girl and best daughter, as she insisted on being called. Mark's mother cried happy tears, telling anyone who would listen how Sarah had brought light back into her sons' and granddaughters' lives. During their first dance, Sarah leaned close to Mark's ear. Remember that night when you came to fix my computer? How could I forget? It changed everything. I was so broken that night, she admitted. Not just the computer. Me. I was lonely and empty and terrified of failing. And then you came, with your kindness and your stories about Emma, and something inside me started to heal. Mark pulled her closer. We were both a little broken, I think. Maybe that's why we fit together so well. As they swayed to the music, Mark caught sight of Emma watching them, her face alight with joy. He beckoned her over, and she ran to join them, the three of them dancing together as a family. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were still difficult days. Emma still occasionally asked about her birth mother, though the questions came less frequently now. Mark and Sarah had disagreements about parenting approaches, about work-life balance, about whose turn it was to do the dishes. But underneath it all was a foundation of understanding, of showing up for each other, of choosing each other every day. On their first anniversary, Sarah presented Mark with a framed photo of his original, Don't Stop Tech Solutions business card alongside a new one that read CEO and Founder. His side business had grown enough that he was considering leaving his day job to focus on it full-time. I believe in you, Sarah told him. Just like you believed in me when I was panicking about that presentation. That night, after they'd celebrated and Emma was asleep, they sat on the porch swing, looking up at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my computer hadn't crashed that night? Sarah asked. If I hadn't called you? Mark considered the question. I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some connections are just meant to be. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. I'm glad we didn't have to wait any longer than we did. Me too, Mark said, kissing the top of her head. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. How a desperate late-night call had led to a conversation that changed everything. How two people, each carrying their own wounds, had found healing in each other. How a family had formed from broken pieces, stronger at the mended places. And he thought about those words Sarah had whispered that night, words that had become a touchstone in their relationship: don't stop. Don't stop sharing. Don't stop listening. Don't stop showing up for each other, even when, especially when, things break down. Because sometimes, it's in our most vulnerable moments, when we're forced to reach out for help, that we find exactly what we've been looking for all along. And as the stars shone overhead and the woman he loved leaned against him, Mark knew with absolute certainty that this family, this love, this life they were building together, was something he would never, ever want to stop.